Good morning, everyone. Hello, Mrs. Lee here. It's Tuesday. It's our second assembly of the week. Mrs. Lee's going to do her assembly today from home. Now, I brought everything back with me, but you know what I'm like. I forget things because I'm so old, and I've forgotten to bring somebody important back with me. Can you guess? There's nobody sitting near me. That's right. Wriggles isn't here. Wriggles? You might be saying, who's Wriggles? You know, Wriggles is our lion. That's right. And we talked about him yesterday. We gave him a name. How did we come to giving him the name Wriggles? What did we do? Can you remember? Oh, that's right. We had a vote. We voted, and we said that voting is one of our British values. Can you show me on your fingers how many British values we've got? That's right, there are 5 British values, and yesterday we talked a lot about democracy, about voting for things, and I asked you if you could remember voting for the school counsellor. Now, we voted yesterday and we got the new name for our lion, Wriggles. We're happy with that. Some of us might not have chosen that name, but we said if the majority, the most people want that name, then we have to go with it. Brilliant. So I'm going to talk again about the British values, and this time we're going to talk about the rule of law. Now, we talked an awful lot about rules before, haven't we? I'm going to show you something now. What's coming up? What's coming up? What's coming up? Oh, we know these. These are that's right, our golden rules. Show me on your fingers how many there are. 7 golden rules. And they keep us happy and they keep us safe. That's right. And we know quite a lot of them off by heart, don't we? Brilliant. But some people, do you know, they don't like rules. Do you think that's a good thing if we didn't have any rules in school? What do you think it would be like? I'll give you a few moments. Maybe you could talk to somebody in your bubble, or maybe you can talk to somebody at home. What would it be like if there were no rules in school? Do you think everybody would run everywhere? Do you think everybody would talk over each other? Do you think maybe people might be a bit unkind to each other? Do you think people would always listen? Do you think they'd remember to say please and thank you? Do you think that they would always be kind and helpful? Do you know, I hope that everybody would. But sometimes people, a bit like Mrs. Lee, forget, and that's why we need our golden rules. And they're there to help keep us safe and happy, but we have them on posters around the school so that we can remind ourselves in case we forget. And everybody makes mistakes, don't they? That's okay to make one mistake, as long as you don't repeat that mistake. You remember when you've been told. I've got a story today. I think this person that I'm going to talk about needs some of these in their home. Okay, are you sitting comfortably? Okay. My story is called Mr. Creep the Crook. There he is. Can you see him? Doesn't look very nice, does he? Okay. Mr. Creep the Crook was a bad man. Mrs. Creep the Crook was a bad woman. And Miss Creep and Master Creep were bad children. And Growler Creep, who do you think that was? The bad dog. I'll show you. You see them? For some of the time, Mr. Creep and his family lived in a secret den. For the rest of the time, they lived in prison. One day, Mr. Creep was sitting in his little prison cell. He was drinking a cup of tea and eating a piece of cake and planning how to get out. See him? Here is Mr. Creep's plan. I'll show it to you. If you can see it very well. It involves a bit of tunnelling, a bit of going under a wall. Mrs. Creep was knitting a jumper. When she saw the plan, she said, "Oh, that's a nice plan. Can we stop at a wool shop?" "And a sweet shop too," said the children. But Mr. Creep shook his head. "No," he said, "no changes to the plan. It's foolproof." A few weeks later, that happened. As you can see, the plan was foolproof. Well, nearly. Can you see? The next day, Mr. Creep was sitting on the beach. He was eating a seaside sandwich and drinking a bottle of seaside beer and planning how to get rich quick. Ooh. Here is Mr. Creep's plan. He's going to rob Mr. Biff and Mr. Cosmo and Mrs. Wobble. And Mr. Biff is going to take his boxing gloves. And from Mr. Cosmo, he's going to take his magic hat. And from poor old Mrs. Wobble, he's going to take some food. Is that a good thing, children? Or is that a good thing or not a good thing? That's right. Dearie me, Mrs. Creep was being buried in the sand by the children, and when she saw the plan, she said, "Oh, that's a very nice plan, but you forgot to go to the wool shop." And a few days later, this happened. The Creeps got biffed by Mr. Biff. And they had their bottoms burned by Mrs. Plug. And Mr. Cosmo the Conjurer played a trick on them. And Mrs. Wobble the waitress dropped jelly on them. And they got stung by bees, and they got kicked by a horse and chased by the cops. The cops are the police. Do you think it's working out for Mr. Creep? By mistake, they also burgled a burglar, and he robbed them. And besides all that, it began to snow. "Oh, was that a foolproof plan then, Dad?" the children said, and Mr. Creep said, "No." Don't think their plan has worked, has it? Well, a few hours later, Mr. Creep was sitting in his secret den, and he was drinking a glass of secret water and sticking a secret plaster on his nose, and also he was dreaming about his cosy prison cell, and he was planning how to get back in. And here is Mr. Creep's plan. So I think he's going to go back under the wall, tunnel through and back into the prison. "This time it really is a foolproof plan," he said. And you know what? It was. Now, as you have seen, Mr. Creep is a bad man. And Mrs. Creep, the crook, was a bad woman. And Miss Creep and Master Creep were bad children. And Growler Creep, the dog, he was pretty bad too. However, most things change. And as time goes by, so after a year or two, the Creeps were not so bad. The Creeps, after another year, were nearly good. And after 6 months more, they were really good. Look at the things they're doing now. I think they're being kind and helpful, do you? I think so. At last, they were let out of prison. Hooray! The next day, Mr. Creep was sitting up in bed, and he was drinking a cup of homemade coffee and eating a nice piece of homemade toast, and he was planning his last plan. Oh, Mr. Creep. It was called the Being Good Final Plan. It was where Mr. Creep gets himself a job as a lollipop man. And Mrs. Creep, she gets a job as a sales lady. And Master and Miss Creep, they go to school and they are top of the class. And Growler the dog, well, he gets trained. When they saw the plan, all the Creeps were very happy. "That's the best plan of all," they all said. "It's perfect, Dad. It's foolproof." And so it was. Well, Nearly. I think Growler needs some golden rules, doesn't he? So Mr. Creep the Crook was a bad man to start off with, doing naughty things. I think he needed some golden rules. He needed to listen to the rules and make sure that he kept the golden rules. Do you keep the golden rules? Of course you do. Alright, and if you forget, they're here in school. And you can find them on the school website. And at the end of this assembly, they are always sitting there. And they're there to help you and to help me and to help all the grown-ups to keep Hertford Infant School and wherever we are a happy place and somewhere that's safe. And that's what we have in the United Kingdom. We have rules, and there are certain things that we are allowed to do, and there are some things that we are not allowed to do. I don't think any of us want to end up like Mr. Creep at the beginning of our story, do we? No, we don't want to be in prison. We want to be free citizens, don't we? That's right. Okay, so we've talked about our second British value. I wonder where we're going to go tomorrow. Maybe we'll go to another one. I promise tomorrow Mrs. Lee will remember to bring Wriggles, alright? And he will be in the assembly. Okay, you have listened really well. Hope that you're going to have a really good day. Is there anything that we could say to help us? Oh, that's right. Shall we do the prayer? Okay. Alright then, you remember that you can sit. You can sit really nice and straight like this. And you can cross your arms, so you can fold your hands together like this. I don't mind, but you must join in with the words. Help me to do the things I should, to be to others kind and good, in all my work and all my play, to grow more loving every day. Amen. Okay, remember those. Think about these and don't be like them. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.